They stole my land, burned my cabin, called it progress. One summer I drove up to my grandfather's forest retreat, only to find a gate, a bulldozer, and a name I'd learned to hate, Karen. That was the day the HOA declared war. They had power, I had legacy, and I wasn't backing down. I hadn't been up to the forest property since last fall. Between work deadlines and a minor knee injury, I refused to see a doctor about. Time slipped past me like it always does. But this summer, I promised myself I'd go back. That place, my grandfather's hunting cabin deep in the Shasta woods, wasn't just land. It was legacy, peace, solitude, my retreat from the noise of asphalt, Wi-Fi, and other people's expectations. I loaded the old Ford with supplies, tools, tarps, coffee, bourbon, and a week's worth of freeze-dried meals that all somehow tasted like salt and regret. As I drove north, winding deeper into the forest roads, the air started to shift. Drier, quieter, more mine. It was the kind of silence you could lean on. A deer darted across the gravel about 20 feet ahead, just like it used to when I came here as a boy with Grandpa Will. I could almost hear his laugh echoing from the passenger seat, telling me to ease up on the gas, son, you ain't chasing it. I turned down the last dirt trail, heart pounding a little faster in that familiar way. The good kind. That sense of arriving at something sacred. Then I saw it, not the cabin, a gate. A goddamn aluminum security gate locked with a heavy chain. On it, a laminated sign in bold black letters. Private property, no trespassing, Forest Ridge Community, HOA. Violators will be prosecuted. At first, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. Maybe the old trail had been rerouted. I backed up, checked GPS. Nope, this was my road, my dirt road. The one Grandpa Will had carved out with a borrowed tractor in 1963. I knew every tree, every bend, and now there was a fence across it. I got out of the truck, walked up to the gate, and stared in disbelief. Beyond the barrier, I could just barely make out the clearing where the cabin should have been. But something looked wrong. The silhouettes didn't match. There were fresh tire tracks, construction signs, a stack of plywood leaning against a trailer. I rattled the chain. It didn't budge. Next to the sign, there was a smaller, newer placard with a phone number. Forest Ridge HOA, Site Supervisor Karen T. Of course, her name was Karen. I called. Straight to voicemail, a robotic voice. You've reached the office of Forest Ridge Community Oversight. Our current business hours are Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Please leave a message or send a written inquiry. It was Saturday. I waited a few minutes, then tried again. Nothing. Then from the woods to my left I heard movement, boots crunching pine needles. A man in a security uniform stepped out, holding a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. No name tag. Just security in all caps across his chest. Can I help you, sir? He asked in that condescending tone you get from mall cops who think they're FBI. Yeah, I said, trying to keep it polite. You can tell me why the hell there's a gate across my land? This area is under administrative control by the Forest Ridge HOA, he said without blinking. Recreational zoning, Phase 1 of the preservation project. The what now? Phase 1. You'll need to speak with Ms. Taylor at the HOA. This area is closed to public access. I'm not the public, I said, stepping forward. This is my property. I've been coming here since I was 8 years old. The deed's in my name. Then you'll need to take it up with the board, he replied. Do you have documentation on you? No. I wasn't planning on proving my own existence today. He tapped his radio. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, sir. I looked past him. From this angle, I could see the clearing more clearly now, and it hit me like a punch to the ribs. The cabin was gone, not fallen apart, not damaged by weather. Gone, bulldozed, flattened. In its place, survey flags, orange construction markers, a portable toilet, and a giant white banner that read, Future Site, Forest Ridge Community Nature Center. My jaw clenched. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sir, the guard repeated, hand resting near his belt. This is your final warning. I didn't say a word. I turned, walked back to the truck, and slammed the door so hard it made the dashboard rattle. I sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield at the forest line that used to belong to me. Then I looked down at the gear shift. The same one Grandpa Will had fixed when I was 16 after I'd cracked it trying to get out of the mud. I could still see his fingerprints on that job, just like I saw them in every corner of that cabin. The one that had just vanished. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was surgical, like someone had carved out part of my life with a scalpel and a bulldozer. I gripped the wheel. This wasn't over, not even close. Monday morning hit like a sledgehammer. I hadn't slept more than a few hours since being turned away from my own land. I drove straight from the motel in Reading to the county recorder's office, carrying a thick binder with every deed, tax receipt, and property map I could scrape together from my home files. It felt like bringing a knife to a drone strike. I was sitting across from a clerk named Lyle, who looked like he hadn't had an adrenaline rush since 2002. Yeah, he muttered, flipping through my paperwork. I see the parcel here. 24 acres, last transfer in 2004. You're the sole owner. That's right, I said, trying not to let my voice shake. So why the hell is there a gate, security, and a bulldozed cabin on it? He raised an eyebrow. HOA involvement? Forest Ridge, I said, run by someone named Karen Taylor. His eyes flicked to mine. Something passed over his face. Recognition? Sympathy? Or maybe just bureaucracy-induced constipation. There was a map amendment filed last winter, rezoning a few bordering parcels as passive green space. That wasn't a few parcels, that was mine. Not according to this. He turned the monitor to show me a digital map overlay. The forest, my land, now colored pale green, labeled Future Development Open Access Preserve. You see this boundary line? He said. HOA claimed this area was unregistered or unmaintained for over 5 years. When parcels aren't used and aren't clearly designated for residence or agriculture, they can apply for reclassification under Local Ordinance 86A. I felt like I was watching someone draw a mustache on the Mona Lisa and call it modern art. It was maintained, I said through gritted teeth. My cabin was standing until 2 weeks ago. Lyle held up his hands. Look, I'm just showing you the paperwork. If there was a mistake, you'll need to challenge it formally. You'll want a land use attorney. I walked out of that office angrier than I'd been in years. It wasn't just theft. It was bureaucratic burglary wrapped in a smile and stamped approved. Back in the truck, I called the number again. This time, she picked up. Forest Ridge, Karen speaking. Robert Martin, you bulldozed my cabin. A pause. Oh, you're the gentleman from Parcel 42. I'm the man who owns Parcel 42, I snapped. And I want to know what the hell you think you're doing. I assure you, Mr. Martin, the HOA has acted within all legal parameters. The parcel was inactive. Under local zoning law, unused forest land within our development boundary can be converted into community preserve space. You should have received a notice. I didn't. That's unfortunate. You trespassed. You demolished private property. That's a felony. Not if the land is under HOA stewardship, she said calmly, like she was reading a recipe for zucchini bread. And according to our updated maps, it is. There was a sharpness in her tone now, subtle but unmistakable. She knew exactly what she was doing. I'll see you in court, I said. I look forward to resolving this civilly, she said. "Good day, Mr. Martin." Click. Back at the motel, I started hunting for lawyers. Half of them never returned my calls. The others politely declined once I mentioned Forest Ridge. "They have teeth," one said, "and friends on the planning board." That's when I stumbled across her article. "When Your HOA Becomes Your Landlord," by Emma Rain, Civic Sun News. It was a deep dive into the Forest Ridge HOA. She tracked multiple cases over the past year where elderly landowners lost control of their property due to vague zoning loopholes and suspicious reclassifications. In one case, an old widow came back from rehab to find her orchard fenced off and a jogging path cut through the middle. She died 6 months later. I sent Emma an email. She replied in under an hour. We met the next day in a coffee shop that was 2 steps below hipster and 1 step above gas station. Emma was in her 30s, sharp-eyed, notepad in one hand, phone in the other. "You're the guy with the hunting cabin," she said before I'd even sat down. "I've been waiting for someone like you." "I didn't think I was special," I muttered. "You're the first one they tried this hard to erase. Bulldozing a standing structure, that's bold. Even for Karen." She showed me a spreadsheet on her laptop. 6 cases in the last 18 months. All quiet, no lawsuits, just people who gave up or got buried under paperwork. "They operate like a snake in a legal suit," she said. "They don't need to be right, just loud, fast, and confusing. By the time people understand what happened, it's too late. I've got records, deeds, proof of tax payments. Then you've got leverage, but you'll need a bulldog attorney and media, a lot of it." Emma offered to run a full expose. I hesitated. "I'm not looking for attention." "You're not getting your land back by being polite," she said. "Karen doesn't play fair. She plays permanent." I nodded. She was right. The gloves had to come off. That night I drove up a side road that curved around the eastern ridge of the property. There used to be an old footpath there. Nothing official, just a way in Grandpa Will liked to call the ghost trail. I parked the truck and hiked through overgrown brush for 20 minutes until I reached the edge of the clearing. Even in the moonlight, it was obvious. My home was gone. Bulldozed, burned, replaced with stakes and signs. But I saw something else too. One of the old metal hunting chairs we'd bolted into the rock decades ago. Still there, half rusted, facing the woods. They hadn't touched that. I sat down on it like a throne and lit a cigarette I didn't even want. My phone buzzed. It was Emma. "Found something," she texted. "Karen might have a personal reason for going after your land. We'll call tomorrow." The wind moved through the trees like it remembered me. This wasn't just about law anymore. It was personal. The first notice arrived on a Wednesday. It was taped to my motel door, sealed in a slick white HOA envelope like it had been blessed by some suburban pope. Inside was a formal cease and desist letter accusing me of trespassing on community property, tampering with construction equipment, and, this part made me laugh out loud, threatening a security guard with physical intimidation. I hadn't even raised my voice. That same day, I got an email from the county's code enforcement office. Karen had filed a complaint stating that my original structure, the cabin my grandfather built with his bare goddamn hands, had been erected without a permit and therefore constituted illegal occupation. I took that one straight to my attorney, Maria Scott, who'd finally agreed to represent me after Emma vouched for her with a few choice phrases like "pit bull in heels," and won a countersuit against a developer that accidentally tore down the wrong house. Maria was a force. She didn't shake hands so much as claim possession of your arm. Her first words to me were, "You have pictures, maps, video, receipts, soil samples, or a resurrection of your grandfather?" I've got tax documents going back 20 years, some photos, and a broken chair bolted to a rock that's older than half the people in this town. She nodded. That'll do. We started building our case immediately. Maria requested a full copy of HOA's filed documents with the county, especially the map overlays and the rezoning application. What came back was a mess of digital files, maps with overlapping coordinates, and multiple dates scratched over by redlining. Karen had been busy rewriting reality. Meanwhile, Emma had gone silent for 2 days, which for her meant she was onto something. When she finally called, her voice was electric. Rob, I just got a copy of a local planning commission memo from 2 years ago. Guess whose name is on the original expansion proposal? I'm gonna guess Karen's. Nope. Her father's, James Taylor, former county surveyor. The original application to incorporate passive use land into the Forest Ridge ecological development model started with him. And get this, your parcel? Highlighted in pink on a map dated 1984. Guess what's written on it? I didn't answer. High priority future acquisition, cabin present, not cooperative. My stomach flipped. That was my grandfather. Bingo. So that was the root of it. This wasn't just about green space or neighborhood improvements. It was a vendetta, old and quiet, now weaponized by Karen in the name of community. Maria's eyes narrowed when I told her. She knew this land was yours. This was personal from the start. And it showed, because by the weekend things got worse. I drove back to the Eastern Ridge again, to the place we called the Ghost Trail. Only this time there were new signs posted. Bright yellow ones with the county seal in bold lettering. Stop work order violation, unauthorized trespass, pending court review. Attached below was a citation fining me. $12,000 for entering what was now labeled Protected Community Development Area. $12,000. For walking on my own land. Maria said not to worry. That fine is like monopoly money until a judge stamps it. But still, the absurdity of it twisted in my gut. They were trying to choke me with paperwork, bury me in process. But I wasn't going quietly. Emma helped me set up a dedicated public archive online, with my deed scans, drone footage of the cleared site, even old photos of me and Grandpa rebuilding the roof in 2003. We named the site Stolen Acres. Within a week, it was shared over 50,000 times. Local news picked it up. A Sacramento journalist emailed me asking for an interview. A Reddit post went viral under the title, HOA demolished my grandfather's cabin and claimed my forest. Emma. That pissed Karen off. How do I know? Because the next day, 2 police officers showed up at my motel. Mr. Martin, the lead officer said, we received a report from Forest Ridge HOA that you made a threat to burn down their new visitor center. Interesting, I said. Since there is no visitor center. He looked sheepish. It's a report. We had to follow up. Maria arrived 20 minutes later and turned them inside out with a printout of GPS logs proving I hadn't been within 2 miles of the property that day. Tell Ms. Taylor, Maria said sweetly. The next false police report will come with its own criminal filing. The officers left quickly. That night I couldn't sleep. So I pulled out the old wooden box I'd found in the remains of the cabin before it was flattened. The only thing I salvaged. Inside, an envelope labeled, For Robert. My name in Grandpa's handwriting. I hadn't dared open it yet, but that night I did. There was a map, hand-drawn. The original layout of the land, notes on trees, trails, deer sightings, and in the corner a quote written in thick block letters. Nothing worth keeping comes easy. If someone wants it bad enough to lie, you'd better want it bad enough to fight. Below that A photo of the two of us in front of the cabin. I was maybe 12, holding a hammer too big for my hands, wearing a grin too proud for my face. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about legacy, and I was done playing defense. They burned it. Not metaphorically, not legally, they actually burned it. I got the call from a guy named Cliff, a local hunter I'd known since my teens. He sometimes passed near the edge of the property and saw smoke coming up through the pines. Thought it was a controlled fire, he told me over the phone, till I saw the metal beams and ashes. The remaining foundation of my grandfather's cabin, what little had survived the bulldozer, was now blackened rubble. The rock-lined fire pit we'd used every summer was melted through. Even the metal chair on the ridge was warped, bent like something out of a war zone. There was no way it was accidental. I drove up that night with Maria riding shotgun and Emma following behind in her dented Honda. Flashlights lit the scorched trees like ghost stories. Maria crouched next to what used to be a corner beam and muttered, "Accelerant. You can smell it." Emma started snapping photos, her expression cold and focused. This wasn't vandalism, this was evidence removal. I knelt in the ash and ran my fingers through the soil. It was still warm. There was no police report, no official explanation. No one had even called it in. It was a surgical erasure, the kind that says, "You think this is your land? Watch us make it disappear." Maria turned to me. "They're scared. This isn't strategy, this is desperation." She was right. 2 days later, a new HOA newsletter hit every inbox in the region. Someone forwarded it to me. Forest Ridge update, misinformation campaigns, and outside agitators. It described a disgruntled individual who had previously squatted on protected green space and was attempting to derail a community project through harassment, false claims, and online defamation. No names, just venom. They were playing smart, weaponizing ambiguity, let people draw conclusions, whisper assumptions. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I released the full archive to the press. Emma helped me package the documents into a downloadable public drop. Land deeds, surveys, tax records, even the GPS-tagged time-stamped drone footage of the bulldozers entering the land. But the real bomb came courtesy of Emma's contact at the planning board. A whistleblower, he provided an internal HOA memo signed by Karen herself, requesting expedited demolition of non-compliant structures on Parcel 42 due to optics concerns. Optics, not legality, not safety, just image. We leaked that too. The fallout was immediate. Regional news stations picked up the story. "HOA warpath," one Chiron screamed. "Private cabin burned in land dispute." Karen panicked. That week I received a civil summons. Karen, acting under the HOA, was suing me for defamation. Property interference and $60,000 in damages. $60,000 for project delays, security costs, and emotional distress. Maria nearly laughed herself off the sidewalk reading it. "Congratulations," she said. "She just gave us everything we need." We filed a countersuit. The next morning, illegal demolition, trespassing, destruction of personal property, and malicious abuse of zoning code. And because Maria was Maria, she attached a preliminary motion for injunctive relief, demanding all development on the property be immediately halted until court proceedings concluded. The county granted it. Karen's entire project froze overnight. That same day, Emma uncovered another piece of dynamite. An audit from 3 years ago showed HOA discretionary funds being redirected into a shell company registered to Taylor & Blake Consulting. Guess who the CEO was? Karen's cousin. The money trail was thin, but real. Over $270,000. Allocated for community enrichment had gone missing. and part of it, we discovered, had been used to hire the same demolition crew that flattened my cabin. This wasn't just theft, it was an operation. Emma called me that night. Her voice was tight. "They've done this before, Rob, just not to someone who fought back." She was scared. So was I. That's when I remembered something my grandfather told me once while showing me how to fix a cracked window with fishing line and spite. The more a man tries to own land that ain't his, the faster he sinks in it. I thought Karen owned the narrative, the board, the system. But now I realized she was sinking. Fast. The only question was how far down I was willing to follow her. The courtroom smelled like dust and sweat and old pine cleaner. Judge Halloran sat behind the bench like a mountain with a robe. No nonsense. No time for theatrics. Maria looked like she was ready for war. Karen, meanwhile, arrived in a cream suit, high heels, and that same expression she always wore, like she was watching peasants quarrel over firewood. Her attorney, slick, overconfident, probably charged by the syllable, was already handing out binders. We had one goal: prove once and for all that Forest Ridge HOA had knowingly, illegally, and maliciously seized and destroyed my property. The trial had been fast-tracked thanks to Maria's emergency motion. The judge wanted answers. So did I. Opening arguments were tense. Karen's lawyer painted me as a disgruntled individual with a nostalgic attachment to an unregistered shack. He argued that the HOA acted in accordance with local preservation initiatives citing public good and safety. He called the cabin a liability hazard exposed to wildlife and deterioration. Maria stood. No notes, just fury and facts. "This isn't about nostalgia, Your Honor. It's about theft, conducted with paperwork, powered by influence and paid for with other people's money. My client's land was clearly deeded, registered, and taxed under his name for over 20 years. The HOA entered it, demolished it, burned the remnants, and then filed a lawsuit to silence him. First up, the maps. We presented the original deed, tax statements, satellite images. Then Maria pulled out the original county survey from 1986, clearly marking the parcel as private ownership. Karen's lawyer tried to object, claiming jurisdictional ambiguity. Judge Halloran raised an eyebrow. "Is ambiguity the same as setting fire to a man's foundation?" No further objection. Next came Emma. She took the stand with poise, laying out the entire timeline. The rezoning application, the fake demolition order, the internal memo signed by Karen referencing optics, the whistleblower letter confirming that the land was flagged due to past personal complications. Maria pounced. "Ms. Rain, could you elaborate on what those personal complications were?" Emma nodded. "Karen Taylor's father attempted to purchase the land in 1984. The current plaintiff's grandfather declined the offer. That parcel has been informally labeled a thorn in HOA development for over 3 decades. Karen shifted in her seat. But the real blow came next. Maria called her final witness, a retired forest ranger named Thomas Creed. He walked to the stand slowly, leaning on a cane. When asked if he recognized the land in question, he nodded. "I used to check in on the Martin boys out there. Old Will and his grandson. Kept that place cleaner than most public parks. Never missed a fire season check-in. Did you ever report that structure as abandoned?" "Hell no. It was always active. Hell, I ate stew there last fall." Chuckles in the gallery. Then Maria delivered the final punch. She rolled in a television cart, an old-school move. On the screen, digitized camcorder footage from 2003. It showed a 12-year-old version of me standing next to my grandfather hammering new shingles onto the roof of the cabin. A timestamp in the corner, GPS metadata layered on screen. Undeniable. "Does this appear abandoned to you?" Maria asked. The silence in the courtroom was louder than any shout. Karen's lawyer stood. "This is highly circumstantial." "Objection overruled," said Judge Halloran. "You're welcome to provide your own footage, preferably one that doesn't end in arson." Karen looked like someone had slapped her with the Constitution. But we weren't done. Maria introduced financial records, linking HOA payments to a shell company operated by Karen's cousin. Payments that covered demolition costs, security contractors, and consulting fees. The judge stared over his glasses. "Ms. Taylor, would you like to explain these transactions?" Karen's lawyer declined to comment. After closing arguments, we waited. 2 days later, we were called back into court for the ruling. Judge Halloran's voice was calm, clear, and cold. "This court finds that the HOA acted outside its legal authority in the seizure, demolition, and redevelopment of Parcel 42. The plaintiff, Mr. Martin, presented irrefutable evidence of ownership, occupancy, and maintenance. The defense failed to justify its actions under any valid interpretation of local zoning law." He looked at Karen. "The use of intimidation, defamation, and unauthorized police complaints will be referred to the district attorney." Then he turned back to us. "Forest Ridge HOA is hereby ordered to pay compensatory damages of $225,000 and some to Mr. Martin for destruction of private property, emotional distress, legal costs, and punitive action." He wasn't done. "Furthermore, all future development on Parcel 42 is permanently enjoined, and the HOA is prohibited from exerting authority over that land in any form. The court also recommends the county conduct an audit of Forest Ridge HOA finances for the past 5 years." Gavel drop. Boom. Karen didn't speak a word. She stood, straightened her blazer, and walked out. I stood there, still absorbing it. Maria grinned like she'd just chewed through a granite countertop. Emma hugged me. "You did it." "No," I said, "we did." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. It felt strange, driving back up the ridge road without fear. For the first time in over a year, no signs warned me away. No security guards waited at the gate. The chain was gone. The cameras dismantled. The metal fence had been hauled off like a corpse. And the air felt like mine again. It wasn't victory in the Hollywood sense. There were no balloons, no fireworks. Just a quiet kind of return. A restoration of something that should never have been taken. The site where the cabin stood was still scorched, but it no longer felt like a graveyard, more like a foundation waiting to be reborn. I spent the next few weeks up there rebuilding, not the whole cabin, not yet, but a work shed, a temporary roof. I dug the fire pit back out and cleared the path down to the creek like Grandpa used to do. I even found one of the old tin cups buried in the ash, half melted and bent, but still recognizable. Maria came by once, brought coffee and a six-pack, and sat on a stump watching me work. "You know," she said, "most people would have taken the money and sold the land." I hammered in a new joist and didn't even look up. "I'm not most people." Emma visited too. She was working on a full-length piece. The Forest Wars, she called it. Her publisher already secured rights for a documentary. "You want to be interviewed for the closing section?" she asked, pointing a camera my way. "I already said enough in court." "Come on," she teased. "Don't you want to go viral one last time?" I shook my head. Going viral is what started this mess. But I agreed anyway. We walked the perimeter as I talked, not about the case or the lawsuit or even the HOA. I talked about the smell of pine in July, the way my grandfather taught me to listen for owls after midnight, how he could tell the weather just by how dry the bark felt. That was the part no one could rezone. Meanwhile, Forest Ridge began to collapse under its own weight. Once the audit started, more irregularities emerged. Karen's cousin's company had bled over $400,000 from HOA reserves under consulting expenses. None of the projects were properly voted on. Several board members resigned. A class action suit followed. Karen herself was banned from any HOA leadership positions in the state. She sold her house within 3 months. Quietly. No goodbye posts, no banners, just gone. But it wasn't just about her anymore. The county board passed a new policy, an amendment dubbed Martin's Clause, requiring any HOA development on forest-adjacent land to include third-party oversight and documented consent from landowners. It wouldn't undo what had happened, but it would make it harder next time. That mattered. One day I came back from town and found a letter in my mailbox at the bottom of the trail. No return address, no signature. Inside, a photo. Me and Grandpa sitting on the porch of the old cabin, both holding tin mugs. Someone must have taken it from one of those old VHS tapes, printed it, sent it. On the back, a single line. You kept it. That's what matters. I didn't cry, but I sat there on the tailgate of my truck for a long time, holding that photo like it was made of gold. The land was mine again, but more importantly, I had proven that even in a world of paperwork, power, and concrete, a man could still stand up and say, "This far, no farther," and be heard. It was the kind of autumn day that makes you forget things ever go wrong. Golden light dripped through the trees. The breeze had just enough bite to make the coffee taste sharper. A few crows cawed overhead, but even they sounded casual about it. The new cabin wasn't finished, not even close, but it stood. A-frame style, cedar siding, wide front porch. I built it with my own hands, using what survived the fire and what I could haul up in the truck. A few neighbors came by to help. Even Cliff, who once tried to sell me a shotgun with a cracked barrel, brought nails and a 6-pack. But today wasn't about construction. Today was about opening, not to the public, not to tourists, to memory. I called it the House of Will, after Grandpa. Not a museum, not a monument, just a space, a place where land meant something, where stories had room to breathe. Maria showed up first, holding a homemade pie like she'd mugged someone's grandma for it. "I don't bake," she said, "but my neighbor does. She thinks you're cute. I told her you're emotionally unavailable and smell like firewood. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all year." Emma arrived next, dragging a small portable podium and a camera tripod. "You told me no speeches," I warned. "I lied," she said. "Journalists lie. It's in the job description." By noon, maybe 20 people stood around the clearing. Not a crowd, just enough to matter. A few former HOA residents, some locals. Even one guy who'd emailed me after reading the Civic Sun article, a former military man who'd lost his land in a similar stunt downstate. We grilled hot dogs. Someone brought moonshine. I had exactly 0 permits for any of it, and it felt glorious. Then, right when I was about to call it a day, she showed up. Karen. She stood at the edge of the clearing, hair shorter now, no blazer, no entourage, just jeans, boots, and a plain black sweater. She didn't step forward, just watched. For a moment I considered ignoring her, but I didn't. I walked over. We stood maybe 6 feet apart, like two boxers who both lost the fight but were still on their feet. "I'm not here to cause anything," she said. "Didn't think you were. I just wanted to see what you built." I nodded toward the cabin. "It's smaller, simpler, but it's mine." "I know," she said quietly. "It always was." There was a long pause, the kind that only works when it comes too late. "I didn't hate your grandfather," she said. "He just reminded my father what he couldn't have, and I inherited that." I didn't answer. She pulled a small envelope from her jacket and handed it to me. "Not legal," she said, "just something that should have come sooner." I didn't open it, just put it in my back pocket. Then she walked away, back into the trees. No drama, no applause, just silence. Back at the porch, Emma raised her paper cup. "To land," she said, "and the mad bastards who refuse to let go of it." Everyone laughed. I raised mine too. "To fences that burn, and the stories that survive them." As the sun dropped behind the ridge, the clearing glowed like something sacred. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was defending anything. I was just living, on my land, where the asphalt ends and the real world begins.